Welcome to the podcast. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Clem, and this is Turns Out We're Gay.
Welcome back. Hope everyone is enjoying the season so far.
Yeah, I'm enjoying doing it. Are you? No, but how do you feel like the season's going so far?
I think it's very different to our first season. I think it's a bit more in depth. I think it's not as surface level as season one, which was a goal that we set out to do, which was just to really kind of delve a bit deeper into topics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one thing that was pretty common with the feedback we had. They wanted more information on all of the things that we talked about. So we're trying to go into more depth and things like that. I mean, it's obviously hard. Given some situations, we've got to also be respectful for other parties involved and things like that. But I think, I think we're getting a bit deeper and hopefully we'll just keep going and seeing what the audience want in terms of how much information they want.
I think we're just becoming a little bit more relaxed with it and not being so cautious and trying to give as much as we can, like you said, with respect to people and stories and things. So, and I think the feedback has been overall really positive, which has been really nice. We're opening up conversations on different topics and allowing people to have two sides, and that's what I've really loved about this season, is that we're not so scared to bring awkward, uncomfortable questions to the table and I guess put our dirty laundry out and have open conversations about it and allow then people to reflect on that in their lives and what they do and what they believe in. I think that's been really interesting. I think mostly I've been impressed by the conversations that are happening in the comments but yeah, it's been a fun ride. On that note, we are actually going to be just as vulnerable as we have been, if not more, while we delve into the topic of mental health, with a focus on coming out and queer mental health, but we'll also touch on our stories and personal struggles that we have, and we'll delve into that a little bit later in the episode. We've had a few listeners reach out to us wanting a more mental health focused episode, so I hope we do justice to this. It's a tricky topic to navigate, especially when you're not a professional, so hopefully we do it some justice. A bit of a trigger warning. So we are talking about mental health. We are going to touch on subjects such as domestic violence, suicide, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and a few other things in between. So if any of that does trigger you, if any of that is something that you don't want to listen to, please move on to the next episode. Otherwise, stay, listen, get involved. Like I said, hopefully we do this topic some justice.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this topic is really close to both of our hearts. We both have gone through different struggles in this world and also similar. One thing I'll say is, particularly with this topic, it's quite hard to be vulnerable about these situations and these topics. And I think I would ask for a little bit of grace in terms of people's responses to it as well. Because I think it's pretty brave of us to sort of put this stuff out there and talk in a raw way about these emotions and things like that.
And neither of us have publicly shared our stories like we have on the podcast. And it takes a lot of courage to sit not only in front of your partner and talk about these things, but on a camera, on a mic, we've got quite a following now, and to talk about things that are very intimate and detailed and that have affected us along our journey. So yeah, like you said, be sensitive, be mindful that we are real people just like you, struggling in all different ways. So yeah, if there's something that comes up in these topics that you think, I don't agree with that, yeah, just be mindful. What we're trying to do is really just bring some light to our stories and how that could help others.
We're not experts. We like to try and make that really clear. We don't know everything. I actually don't know much at all, but we don't know everything, and there's professionals out there that deal with this stuff for a reason. So we're just going to touch on a couple of statistics and things like that, but otherwise it's really going to be focused on our stories in this episode and talk about things so that hopefully can relate to people that are going through something similar, because that's one of the things that we both really struggled with when we were going through things, whether it be coming out or anything else, is the resources and something relatable out there that we can lean on, in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we jump into statistics, let's just touch on resources. I'm going to link more information below. I won't go through who the resources are officially here. I want to make sure that who we provide will be the right people. But as you know, there's always Lifeline Beyond Blue. But family and friends, if you find yourself in a situation where you can't talk about this to family, find a friend. I'm sure your friend will be more than open on occasions, even when you think they won't be, to listen to you. Connecting with us. We've had some really great people with interesting stories that are going through some challenges. Email us, message us, wanting our advice. We don't know everything, but we can be a friend. And that's the whole reason why we set out to do this podcast, is to be a platform for people who are struggling or who are going through this and don't have someone, you know. So send us a message. We might not get back to you straight away, but we will do everything we can to try and come back to you with any advice that we have or anything that helped us. But in the immediate stage, if you are struggling with anything, always make sure that you reach out to the right resources to get the help that you need.
Definitely, people often struggle because they don't have those resources readily available and presented to them. And particularly in coming out instances, either the family or the friends might not react the way you want them to. So I think social media for us is a really big thing that helped us. But also, you could even go to the point of putting something out on your story or something saying, look, I'm really struggling. Is there someone out there that I can have a chat to, kind of thing?
Yeah.
If you're not, able to do any of the other options, think a bit outside of the box, because I know that I've seen the odd friend post something about not feeling 100% and wanting to chat, and I'm always willing to do that, and I'm sure many others are. So there's always people out there willing to listen. You just need to find them.
Yeah, absolutely. Going through the statistics was really eye-opening for me. Obviously, going through coming out myself, I know how I felt at the time, how isolated I felt, the depression that I felt from it. But I didn't realize just how significant the numbers are for the queer community. It was interesting to see, different parts of the queer community and who kind of deals with those things more. So we wanted to just touch on some statistics now. I'll go through that, and then I guess we'll have a little bit of a discussion after about our thoughts.
Yeah, I will add that I actually haven't been across this research that you've done, and I haven't seen the statistics, and we did that on purpose so that I can kind of react a little bit blindly to it. So it'll be interesting to hear it, because I'll also be hearing it for the first time, and we can break it down there.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what you find surprising or what you thought, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so let's have a chat about some stats. So these stats were put together by Beyond Blue, and it's specifically for the LGBTQIA plus community. There were participants from the community who were a part of the research. So the stats that we're going to talk about is specifically around that. So the study found that 57.2% of participants reported high or very high levels of psychological distress. This is 4 times higher than people among the general population.
The fact that it's 4 times higher than the general population really doesn't surprise me, because I think there are a lot of hurdles to get through when it comes to coming out or being queer in general. So it doesn't surprise me, that statistic. It's sad, but it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, it didn't surprise me either. Although I think for me, knowing the current statistic or some of the current statistics in just the general population, it's sad to think that a majority are coming from people like the LGBTQ plus community. And that 57.2% is extremely high. And I hope that over the years we see that number go down as more resources come out to help people. That is a high number. The next one is 3 in 10 people who identify as LGBTQIA are currently experiencing depression. So if you're in a group of friends, let's just say you've got 10 friends, 3 of them might be experiencing depression. How do you feel about that, knowing our friendship group is nearly, like our close friendship group is nearly 10, I think. It's getting there.
Is it? I think
There's only 6 of us.
We're
But
literally halfway.
But what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm actually surprised. I think it would be higher. I think a lot of the time it would be higher, particularly like I'm just thinking about me and my friendship groups, not necessarily just the one that we often talk about, but in all different friendship groups. I know that I've talked to people in those groups and almost all of them have been or going through something like that. And I think it depends as well on how open you are with your group. I'm a sensitive little sook and I talk about my feelings, and I think it opens up doors for people to talk about theirs.
Yeah.
So I know for us, we're really transparent with our group and they are the same with us back. So I think the number's actually quite low there for the 3 in 10 people, to be honest. I think it would be higher.
Interesting. Okay. 50.3% of people in the LGBTQIA plus community currently experience an anxiety disorder that is 2.5 times the rate of heterosexuals.
Yeah, that again doesn't surprise me. I think when you are in a group that is how people would say against the norm, I don't agree with that, but a lot of people would say that there's the normal population and then there's the outsiders type thing. For me, that comes with a lot of stresses and a lot of extra things to worry about. And I'll go into my anxiety stories and journey that I've been through. But for me, it doesn't surprise me because anxiety a lot of the time is about worrying, overthinking, overanalyzing situations. And there are definitely risks when it comes to being queer. Okay, if you think about a heterosexual person in life, of course, we're not sitting here saying that they don't have stress, they don't have mental health issues, they don't go through things, because absolutely, like the numbers are still there for the general population, absolutely, and it's horrifying the numbers that are there. However, you think about what they go through in life and then also just add on another aspect of your life being completely different from majority of the population, you're naturally going to have a lot more hurdles and a lot more issues that come along with that, whether it be, things that walking in life, you look different to someone else, you're holding someone else's hand that's different to the person next to you or whatnot. That can bring a whole other ball game of stresses. Not only that, you have things like internalized homophobia, you have the fact that the world was very homophobic not that long ago and it still is today, and in different parts of the world it's still illegal. So there's all these different things that come into play, I think, that maybe add, and that's why I think it's the numbers are 2 times, and you're hearing these numbers of it's something times the heterosexual reaction. Because I just think as well as all of the other stresses in life, you also have that added thing on top of it. I don't think it's that we have more or less or whatever. It's just maybe one additional thing that can also pile up on top of the pile that everyone else does have.
Yeah. And I love what you said there around like being heterosexual. You absolutely still have all of those stresses, but imagine having, debt issues and struggling to find work and PTSD, for example, and I'm just kind of throwing some things out there, and then adding on top of that you might be going through a gender identity issue, or you might not be sure if you're gay and you're kind of struggling with that, or you're in a marriage with somebody and you've realized that you're actually, turns out you're gay, like dealing with that. So it's just an added thing. And I'll just touch on this before we move to the next step. But if I use an example of us being in Bali, we have been very anxious about,
Absolutely.
How careful we need to be. And obviously we're being very careful, probably could relax a smidge, but it is an extra piece of anxiety around like, I can't touch your hand. I can't kiss you in public. I can't do these little things because it might put you in danger. And that is a different type of anxiety. And yeah, so I think I can understand the 2.5 times because I think it's just an added level, like you said, and that makes a lot of sense.
You made 2 points that I'll touch on there that I think are things other people wouldn't necessarily think about. If you think about, particularly, you know, the heterosexual people in this podcast that are listening and whatnot, if you think about going somewhere like Bali and not being able to hold your partner's hand once whilst you're out in public, like it's actually quite confronting unless you're just really not affectionate, which I wouldn't understand that anyway. But if you are an affectionate person, not being able to say "love you, babe" when you're driving off on a scooter, like we've said the odd thing like "love you, bestie" or something silly like that, and we are overly cautious because we overthink things. It genuinely is a risk. So you've got to think about those things. Also, one other thing you mentioned was things about getting a job. If you're, you know, you mentioned if you're struggling financially and you're struggling with unemployment and whatnot. And there's the whole other aspect of when it comes to working and jobs and getting a job, you have to be conscious that they might find out that you're queer. Will that be an issue? Whether or not you care if it's an issue, whether or not you're worried about losing a job potentially if it is an issue, whatnot. And they're not everyday issues and things like that necessarily. And most workplaces will be fine with it, but they're all just small little things that I think people don't think about unless they're going through it and experiencing themselves that add up. Go to a gym, try and do a deadlift, add 2.5 kilos on to your max rep. Keep adding on 2.5 kilos. You're not going to be able to lift it.
Yeah.
It's a tiny little weight that you're putting on it, but the difference is astronomical.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So those numbers don't surprise me at all. And I know we're going to touch on anxiety a little bit later as well. But moving on to the next one, there is evidence that people identifying as transgender and people with intersex variations have some of the highest levels of distress. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's something that neither one of us can relate to. So we're careful to not touch on the topic too much in a personal sense. However, I know what I went through coming out and figuring out myself. I can only imagine if that was then something to do with gender.
Yeah.
I just think it would be absolutely 10 times harder.
Yeah. I know when I was coming out, there's this like feeling of that this is who I am and I can't be this person because of all of these reasons. Coming out as gay, lesbian, bi, pan, whatever, I think is, and I don't want to take away from it, but it is so different to then dealing with gender. I just think that it's such a deep thing to go through. I can't even imagine what people who are struggling with that go through. And we don't touch on the statistics around transgender too much. I've only got 2 more to go through. But when I was reading, and I recommend anyone read this, it was like 97% or something like in the 90s of transgender people struggle with every single one. Anxiety, depression, suicidation. You know, it was every single one. They were at the top of the list.
Yeah.
So I think if you have a transgender friend or someone who is, you know, going through a gender change or questions or, like they said, an intersex variation, reach out to them because it's not 3 in 10. It's probably more like 9 in 10 or 10 in 10 are dealing with that. And I can't even imagine what that would be like. The last statistic that I want to share is 1 in 6 young LGBTQ plus people between 16 and 27 have attempted suicide. You're 29.
I came out at 27.
I came out at 26. And I didn't fully come out until I was 29. And that is a scary number. Some of our friends are in that statistic. And that's so scary. And I don't even know what to say about that one.
It makes sense because I think naturally as you grow and mature, you learn more about life and you start to not care as much about what people think. And I think that's a big battle. It was for me anyway. I couldn't have fathomed doing something like this earlier on because I just didn't have the mental capacity for it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me because I think as you grow and you mature, you realise and you're also exposed to different things. And I wonder if that stat is the way it is because when we were growing up, there wasn't that representation. There wasn't that there wasn't that exposure to the queer world. And that's one thing I knew when I came out was my younger sister at the time took it the best and reacted the best. And she's, you know, a typical 21-year-old. I think she's actually older now, but who knows. But she's a typical young female, and you wouldn't expect such a mature reaction from her. But because she's had the exposure, because she has multiple friends that have gone through something or come out in some way and whatnot, I'm hoping that it's the people like us that had that growing up experience, and that number will change. But whether or not it does is a different thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think I'm hoping schools now and teenage years and those types of things are much different, because when we were in school, I couldn't even imagine coming out as queer. Oh my gosh. And I know there were some people that were very proudly queer in my school, and I loved that. But it was a very small group.
You love that a bit too much sometimes, I reckon. I reckon there's a couple of crushes there.
No, never. I also found in school there was a lot more gay men than lesbians. So, like, I noticed that there was a lot more outwardly gay guys in my school year. And it was like, yeah, cool. Like, that's awesome. But there wasn't, I couldn't even tell you off the top of my head a lesbian at school that I can think of. Like, there were girls, obviously, if you've listened to episode 1 or 2, I kissed a girl, but and that was like a thing. Like, I think it was like girls just kind of being still quite closeted or bi or whatever, but not outwardly. I can't tell you off the top, and school friends, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't think of at a time in high school where there was a lesbian who was outwardly dating a girl.
Yeah, and I could be wrong as well, but I don't think I am. But I've said it as well in this podcast that I have about 5 or 6, I think, in a very small year. I think we had about 15 people in the girls' class of our school, and about 5 or 6 of them, I reckon, have come out either bi or trans or lesbian, whatnot. But there's definitely a good couple in there that were lesbian. And I remember we had conversations, and it was like, who would kiss a girl? And one person, I remember it was very clearly one night at a party said, who drink if you would kiss a girl, and one girl drank, and everyone was like, oh, like she's a lesbian, whatever. Yeah. And I couldn't fathom that then, and obviously they couldn't either. And I do agree with you, there was definitely some gay guys, and I think it also, I genuinely think that it comes down to exposure and representation, because if you think about it, one thing I did notice growing up was things like Queer Eye with the Straight Guy. There was plenty of that flamboyant, stereotypical gay man, which we know now obviously isn't the only type of gay person. It's not the only type of representation that needs to be had, but there was plenty of gay men in media.
Yeah.
I still can't think of any other than Ellen DeGeneres, which I didn't even know about, really. It was kind of hidden.
Yeah, I didn't even know. Like, I wouldn't have watched Ellen's show and been like, oh, Ellen's gay. It wasn't until later in life that I was like, oh, she's got a wife and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I can't think of anyone, off the top of my head. And of course, as life went on, you saw in movies and things, there were more like lesbian characters, but those lesbian characters were like butch, really in your face. But yeah, I don't know. I think times are different. I think that's why I'd love to see the statistics of how many people have come out as lesbian, late bloomers. I reckon it's skyrocketed because there was so much like, you can't be that person, or you've got to be a certain way. You got to want the husband and the kids. And
I was about to say it's the societal expectation of women to find a husband and produce children. That really is what society pushes. I really hope that these numbers change.
I hope they do too. I think there is a lot of work going into LGBTQ plus resources, help. People like us who are trying to bring more representation out there that's a bit softer and not necessarily about, sitting one-on-one with a therapist or something. Like, you're just coming here and listening, and you can kind of deal with that in your own comfortable space. And I think that's really good. And I do hope there's more podcasts and shows and things that come up like ours to try and help people figure it out. But yeah, you know, our inbox is full of late bloomers. So
It's full of them.
full of late bloomers.
It's like we all hit a certain point and just went, hang on,
I'm actually gay.
I can be a lesbian. I didn't
That's
realize this was a fucking option. Sign me up.
Shit. And it all happened through COVID. And I think that's because they actually
Exactly.
they got on TikTok, saw a couple of those hot lesbians come on their feed, and they were like, well, fuck me.
Quite literally.
I know this is a serious episode, but that's literally what happens. Like, I think
100%.
everyone during COVID just they had so much time on their hands.
Literally.
TikTok was readily available and hot, and what happens? Everyone comes out. So that's the statistics that we wanted to go through today, and what we've decided to do is make this a 2-part episode because we want to make sure that we're bringing as much attention to this and we're navigating this conversation as carefully and thoughtfully and full of information as we can. So in the next episode, we're going to touch more on our stories individually, what we went through, what to expect. And then we're also going to touch on our own mental health challenges. You're going to touch on your story more around anxiety and the steps that you went to get where you are now. I'm going to talk more about PTSD. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we hope you understand why we want to make this a 2-part episode.
Yeah, as you know, we can harp on a fair bit. But no, we really did want to give the attention and love this episode deserved. And I think upon reflection, halfway through the episode, we realised this wasn't going to be something we wanted to squash into the one episode. And I think it's also going to open up a whole other category of conversation if this is something that the audience resonates with, which we already know that they do from briefly mentioning these topics. So we want to give it the right attention it deserves, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Well, I think enjoyed's not really the right word, but I hope it opened people's eyes, to be honest.
I hope this episode opened your eyes to realise that you're not alone. And that's what these statistics really showed me, is that there is so many other people that are struggling with this. And I felt for me for the longest time that I couldn't talk about this with anyone ever. And now I have so many people in my corner. And I think you'd be surprised. I know it's hard, but talk to someone. And if it's not someone in your close group, talk to someone else. Talk to a stranger, find a queer stranger or someone that will listen, because they've probably gone through this as well. I also hope that if we have any parents or friends of people who are queer, if you're a parent who has a queer child and you've just found out or you've got a suspicion and you don't know how to help them, I hope these statistics help you understand that, you know, it's hard for them and it's hard what they're going through. And we don't want these statistics to go up. We want them to go down. And getting them and help and supporting them as much as you can is so important. So I hope that if you are, like I said, a friend, a family member, or someone who just is thinking that maybe they've got a queer friend that's struggling, I hope that you've listened to this podcast and taken something away from it, and, you know, have a think about how you might be able to support that person in your life.
Absolutely. And this episode was tailored more towards coming out and the challenges involved in that. But these stats aren't just for people coming out, it's for people living their lives as queer human beings. So not only that, but touch in with your queer friends and make sure that you're sort of aware that this is the stats. This is what they're going through a lot of the time. And I know that when we released the first couple of episodes and we touched briefly on our sort of stories and how hard it was and things like that, one of my sisters actually reached out. In fact, I think I had a friend as well, and just sort of said, I had no idea that it was this hard for you. And it baffled me, but also I kind of hit it. But that's the thing, is you got to be there for these people in your life. Especially as well, I will say, if you are a queer person and you see someone else going through a transition of some sort, or coming out or whatnot, or even just living a queer life, let's stick together. Like, reach out to them, be a support network, create a little group. I'm here for that.
coming out, like just saying the words is one thing, but you continuously evolve. And I think if you are a friend, family, whoever, of someone who is queer listening in on this, just know that the buck doesn't stop with coming out. There's so much more that comes into it. These statistics aren't just about coming out. It's about the story and the experience that that queer person goes through every single day. So anyway, that's enough from us. We hope you found this episode helpful. I know we've been saying we hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you did, but I hope you found this episode helpful and insightful. And yeah, tune into part 2 of this where we talk a little bit more about ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Love you. Bye.